Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session. It's called Solid as a Rock, Unlocking Efficiency in Remote Production, with some key insights from our guests from EMG Gravity Media and of course Calrec Audio. My name is Henry Goodman. I'm head of the product management team at Calrec, and today we're going to explore how cutting-edge remote technologies are helping to reshape how live production is being done. Over the last 8 to 10 years, remote production has come from an innovative idea pretty much into the mainstream of operational standards. And that shift has come with certainly some new challenges, but also some exciting opportunities. Calrec is proud to have been part of this journey with EMG Gravity Media, whose pioneering work in remote production and centralised production, which we'll learn more about in a minute, is helping to define what is possible in the remote production world today. Joining me on the stage, I have three experts from EMG Gravity Media, specifically chosen for their different points of views within that organisation. Narinder Ball, Director of Technology. We have Paul, sat in the middle, Paul Sykes, Chief Facility Engineer, and Neil Otley, Senior Audio Engineer. Together we'll be looking at how their workflows have evolved, how tools like Calrec's True Control are helping them deliver greater efficiencies in a remote or distributed environment. So let's get started. Narinder, I'd like to start with you. To set a bit of context to what we're talking about today, can you give us an outline of the sort of motivations behind remote production, obviously for EMG and Gravity Media, but perhaps for other facilities providers as well?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the industry started looking at remote production before COVID, mainly for sustainability reasons. But then, as we all know, COVID really accelerated remote productions and the workflows that we could achieve using the technologies. And it was really out of necessity, it was one of those things that numbers were just limited on site. There wasn't a choice. That was the only way to go during COVID. Post-COVID, I think more and more broadcasters and federations now are looking back to those sustainability reasons and those carbon savings they can achieve by not travelling lots of people and lots of equipment to various locations around the world.
I think it's fair to say that the beginnings of remote production was before COVID, but it certainly accelerated that dramatically, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it probably condensed where we would have been over a 5-year period into a much shorter period because we just had to find those solutions, and that's where things like, Calrec RP1 really came into its own as well. But, certainly from a provider's point of view, it was having to come up with those solutions that the broadcasters and federations were looking for and being able to do it really quickly and efficiently.
So Paul, I'd like to get a bit more involved in the sort of Westworks project now. Could you talk us through sort of the technical and commercial considerations that you had behind the EMG's Gravity Media's remote production centre, and perhaps what the operational and commercial drivers were?
Commercially, it was price. It was we were building a very ambitious timeline we were working to. It was a very ambitious project we were working to, where we were building at that stage a 6 production gallery facility on a 5th floor of an office block over in Shepherd's Bush. It was a very compressed timeline as well. From us taking possession of the building and the builders starting to knock down walls, it was 17 weeks later we went on air. So there was a lot of consideration of what was readily available in the marketplace for us to purchase in a short period of time. Some people were saying, it could be 10 to 12 weeks lead time on pieces of equipment. So and because of not just our relationship with Calrec, but because of our relationship with suppliers like Calrec, we at least could say to them, this has got what's going to happen. We're not in a position yet to place orders, but we will happen. So Calrec are actually, in that particular case, and others, were very good at assembling desks before that, assembling the desks before we'd actually even place the orders. But yeah, I mean, the sustainability piece was something as well that was a driving. We were trying to use kit that we knew. In the case of certain manufacturers, Calrec being one of them again, we'd done a large purchase of some Calrecs 2 years previously, so it was a product familiar with. And then for us, at that time, it was Gravity Media on their own. There was rumours that EMG and Gravity Media were going to join forces at some point, but at that particular time, it was Gravity Media on, and we needed to have a product that was being used out on the roads that we could then remote back into Westwork. So that was a big technical consideration, that what we were familiar with on the road was also what we were putting into Westworks. And actually by luck more than anything, I suspect that both when the EMG Gravity Media merger happened, their trucks were also stacked full of the same equipment that we happen to have. So it's made that transition of us integrating that as a remote production into easier.
Did you have a vision for sort of where the savings would come from in terms of it being a centralised production?
Yes, we did. The savings were, some of it was just because we could use, in this particular case, in the Calrec case, we've got a central core, so the amount of equipment we've had to buy to do the same thing, whereas in a truck we'd have to buy X, Y, Z. In this case, we only have to buy X because we can use X 4 or 5 times. So in the case of the new impulse cores, that's a very good example of where that is. We can now hang 4 audio control surfaces off that impulse core. So the cost to us is beneficial. We're doing the same with our vision mixer crates. We've got 2 large vision mixer crates that we hang 8-9 galleries off of those 2 vision mixer crates, and that's of course is a saving to us as well.
Neil, I'd like to come to you next. From an engineering point of view, can you give us a sort of flavour of the sort of biggest technical challenges you had in setting up the ROC at
sure.
Gravity?
I think from an audio point of view, obviously some of the biggest challenges we face are around latency, timing, and network connectivity. So, I mean, if you think of a traditional facility, we don't have the luxury of having a wraparound studio that we can fall back on if an OS goes down or the OB goes off. So you've got to think that everything coming into the building is an external source, it's an outside source. So we have to guarantee that the network connectivity, that those feeds coming in are fully redundant, fully resilient, so that if there is an issue, we're able to seamlessly switch over to another path. Obviously, audio sync is quite a big thing to think about at the same time, but then the timing, the latency of those feeds to and from site really becomes a major factor for us, because you've got to think that everything that we send to site, there's going to be latency, a delay inherent on the network, and everything coming back to us from site will have an inherent delay on it. So we need to obviously limit that delay as much as we can, but we also need to understand it and accommodate it as well. So this is where something like the RP1 comes into its own and allows us to kind of to get around any of those kind of issues of time in between feeds coming into site. I mean, also with Westworks itself, obviously it being a 2110 facility from day one, we also knew that there was going to be a lot of obviously legacy audio feeds that we'd need to incorporate into that. So just, not just Ravenna, Dante, AS67, we'd also need to obviously accommodate analog, AAS and MADI as well. So we needed to obviously think of an audio partner that was able to provide us with a solution that would allow us to fully integrate all of those various audio streams seamlessly, but also have one eye on the future, because obviously, I mean, we're already partway through a phased expansion of Westworks at the moment, which is very soon very soon after the initial build anyway. So we're already expanding. So we Calrec fitted the bill for us in terms of obviously the products that are available, things like the IP gateways, impulse cores, Hydra 2, all of that networking together and working seamlessly really worked for us.
Okay.
We found a lot of challenges with especially time in terms of PTP, because you start delving into it works with PTP, but some of it works with the PTP v1, some of it works with PTP version 2, some of it is level
it's one step
PTP,
Yeah,
some of it's two-step PTP, and so when we'd had experience because of our fly packs of building small IP setups, but at this scale that we were working at was different, and initially we had quite a few scary times with PTP, making PTP work right, so much so that we had to in the end rip up the network a little bit and move something from that switch to that switch to make all the step 1 and step 2 work, and that's been a real learning curve. And anybody who thinks it's easy. Oh, you just go to Mindburger, you just go to Telestream and go buy an SPG, and that'll sort your problems out. It's not. It is a minefield.
Yeah, I think the message there is that PTP is the core of your network,
yes.
really. So that's the first thing to get right.
However, we still do use old school reference everywhere,
Right.
because we still having to use 50. And in our particular case, we've got 2 BNCs at the back of every bit of kit that takes a bit of referencing. One's got 50 on it, one's got 60 on it, because we're actually doing 50 and 60 productions in different galleries at the same time as well. So
you're not making life difficult for yourself.
it's
So following on from your RP1 comments,
Yeah.
Neil, I wonder if you can talk us through typical workflow that you have in terms of remote production, where people and equipment are sort of located, and how your teams use the RP1.
Sure. I mean, in terms of kind of division of labour, we generally have obviously a supervisor and a guarantee at Westworks who will look after the local PCR, sound control room, and any VT replay areas that need sorting there, and they'll look after the comms on site here. We'll also then have typically a guarantee on site alongside an A2 assistant who'll maybe be looking after the presentation area. I mean, we're probably somewhere, it's probably around about 90% of the productions that come through Westworks now are using RP1s. And we are using them in slightly different ways. So, for example, for TNT, rugby and football, and also Formula E, 2 of our bigger clients, we're primarily using the RP1 as an on-site in-ear mix. So, obviously, following on from what we were talking about with the latency on the circuits, obviously, if we were to do it in a more traditional way, and obviously we have mics coming back from site and we're mixing them, if we were to then send a clean feed or a mic mix back to site so the presentation team could hear themselves, because you've got to remember that a lot of these people are in stadiums with 50, 60,000 people in them. It's very loud. They might be stood a metre apart from each other, but they still can't hear each other. Now, if you're sending those feeds back from Westworks to them so they can hear each other, obviously there's going to be a delay incurred, and then it's going to be very off-putting when someone's, even if it's 100, 200 milliseconds out, it's still very off-putting live when someone you're talking to here is out of sync. What we have to do there with the RP1s is we present all of the feeds into the RP1 to begin with, and that allows us to then pair faders on the desk at Westworks with the RP1. It allows us to do a real-time mix on site, and then we feed all of the in-ear presentation, all of their in-ears from an aux feed out of the RP1 itself. So it allows us to do a real-time mix for the pres team on site, and they can all hear each other in real time. For ATP, we are not only doing that, but we're also utilising the more of the control side of it as well, because we've got 2 sound control rooms at Westworks that are actually carrying out mixes for 3 different courts B, C and D incoming. So they're actually doing the whole court mix remotely. But what the RP1 allows us to do is then to give the gain control to the mixer in Westworks as well. So obviously, whilst they're doing that mix, it gives them direct control of the mic gain amp on site without having to go through various levels of talkback to go and ask someone on site to go and tweak any gains and anything like that. So it really allows a much more seamless interaction and production to run a lot smoother.
So Narendra, I know you're familiar with the RP1 as well. From an operations point of view and a management point of view, what are the advantages that you've seen?
Well, I think, Neil's highlighted most of them really eloquently there. When I've seen it in use and we've used it, has been on major events or other places where you've got a remote studio and you're using it to provide that in-ear mix that Neil just explained there, where, you don't want to wait for the delay of a presenter asking a question, that going all the way back to a remote gallery, coming all the way back, and, you've got that delay between your presentation team answering it. So it is really that seamless workflow on site for the presentation team so that they're not noticing the delays that the teams back at the remote gallery are working with. But also so that the people at home aren't noticing a difference either as to whether they're on site or remote.
Okay. So I've been given signals we're running out a little bit out of time, so I'll move things on a bit. Neil, just going, you've a little bit familiar with our new True Control version 2
Yes.
that we've brought out, and the cloud Impulse V DSP. What opportunities do you see in those sort of technologies moving forward?
Well, I think, especially when we're looking at how we're utilising the RP1s at the moment, and obviously True Control 2.0 can be expanded across the Argo range, the RP1s, as well as the Type R as well. What that really expands for us is the level of control that we've got across all of those various devices. So, currently there are limits to what we can do in terms of kind of fader control routing with the RP1. What it opens up is things like dynamics, EQ, delay, all of that sort of processing that really you need to have direct control of if you're doing a true remote mix from Westworks. And the fact that with the Argo mixers that we've now got installed over at Westworks, so we've now got 2 Argo S's and an Argo M, and the truck builds that are currently going on with EMG, we've got Argo desks also going into the truck. So what this now means is we have that ability or that opportunity to do a true remote control of a surface on site. So, we can have the Argo S desk at Westworks do, completely controlling a console on site and have the full range of control that currently we don't or that we can't utilise. But obviously that we can expand that onto the existing RP1s as well. So even for the events that we currently have with ATP and FE, we can expand that. With Impulse V as well, I think what that will add is a very nice DSP engine in the cloud. From my personal experience, I think cloud production, the one bit that gets left behind a lot is the audio side. So having that available and having the ability to control that from an Argo desk directly, I think really expands what we could do in the future.
Excellent. So, Paul, I'd just like to maybe ask the last question of you. As Neil so eloquently said, you've now got some of the Calrec's latest generation of products. So the Argo surfaces and the Impulse cores. With the new sort of remote technologies, where do you see that going for EMG Gravity Media, and what are you looking for the future?
EMG, on that particular side of a truck, have historically always been a truck company. And everybody keeps on saying to us, oh, the trucks are dead now, trucks are dead. EMG are building more trucks, but they're building different types of trucks now. And I think where we will get to is we will see a lot more, even more people doing remote production at places like Westworks, and trucks still on site, but more people moving in-house. So currently we do 2 types of remote productions. We do remote productions where it's multiple signals come back and it's all produced at Westworks, or we do ones where we connect to the truck's vision mixer or the truck's EVS network. And now I think we're going to but there's still a lot of people on site, and I think now we're going to end up with those people coming more back into Westworks because it helps with the sustainability side. You know, one of the benefits that we found is, as an example, this weekend is 160 people across 24 hours this weekend, because we've got tennis from Rome, we've got rugby from somewhere, I don't know where the rugby's from, Saracens I think, and we've got Formary from Tokyo, and that's 150 odd, 160 odd crew at Westworks who are not taking a flight to Tokyo, not hotels in Tokyo, etc. And also for us, the kit utilisation is we're now wanting to. It's a lot easier for us if we're not burning money on a truck where there's a Calrec in a truck. It's actually at Westworks, so we can use it more than once on a day. It's not got to drive to site, in our case, fly to Tokyo, etc. So yeah, that's the benefit for us. I think we'll see, unfortunately, some people won't like it, but I think we'll end up seeing more people coming back, going less out on site and more into facilities like ours and others in the UK.
Yeah, I think it helps us offer more flexible and scalable solutions all around, doesn't it? And it helps us be a lot more dynamic and agile with our solutions that we can offer customers.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Narinder, Paul and Neil, for your insightful perspectives there. I think it's very clear from the conversations we've had that these sort of remote production technologies are very much a strategic enabler, enabling us to utilise the resources, both technical and human resources, just as probably more importantly, human resources that we have available to us. So, yeah, thank you very much for your insight there. Whether you're planning your first foray into remote production or you're sort of developing workflows that you already have, I think the message is quite clear. Efficiency and control go hand in hand with the flexibility and scale. Thanks to everybody for coming to listen to us today. Hope you're leaving with some practical ideas and insights. If you have any questions or you want to see True Control version 2 for yourself, please come over to the Calrec stand. We're on A40 at the other end of the hall. You're very welcome.